The ayes are 60, the noes are 61. The motion is not agreed to. Call on members' order of the day number 2.
Reserve Bank of New Zealand, Amending Primary Function of Bank Amendment Bill, first reading.
Right Honourable Winston Peters.
I move that the Reserve Bank Amending Primary Function of Bank Amendment Bill now be read a first time. I nominate the Finance and Expenditure Committee to consider the bill. Mr. Speaker, in 1989, when Parliament passed the Reserve Bank Act, it was hailed as a watershed moment in New Zealand's political and economic history. In fact, it represented a major ideological shift in the way monetary policy is implemented. Not only did it result in a new interest rate-centred framework, but the Reserve Bank was also given full operational independence from the government for the first time. And if anybody says thank goodness for that, well, his predecessors had unleashed the dogs of inflation. So bad were they that the overnight rate, 3 times for the lending rate, went past 1,100% on 3 different nights. The proponents argue that this was a fundamental step change necessary to lift New Zealand out of the depths of social... Now, this is when you're running around in school pants. Out of the depths of social and economic despair by conquering the greatest evil of all, inflation. In fact, controlling inflation became an end in itself. They told us this would lead to a more efficient, more productive, more stable, more prosperous economy. We were all going to be better off. They based this on the belief that raising or lowering interest rates can create price stability without any long-term costs, and all but a few of us believed it. The fact is they were wrong, and 23 years later, we are grappling with the consequences. The purpose of this bill, therefore, is to challenge those failed monetarist ideas. The belief that inflation should always take precedence over other critical macroeconomic factors is not only absurd, but it is reckless in the extreme for a nation like ours. The biggest side effect of all has been a high and volatile exchange rate, the most volatile in the world. We're seeing it right now, the dollar at 83 cents and climbing. This has put enormous strain on the tradable sector, the engine room of the New Zealand economy, where real wealth, and I emphasise that, real wealth, is created. Since 2008, a total of 40,000 jobs. Where people are concerned, the human factor, and families as well, but 40,000 jobs have been lost in the manufacturing sector alone. On average, that's almost 100 per week. Not foreigners and aliens, but New Zealanders and New Zealand jobs being lost. And those numbers continue to increase. In the last month, 100 jobs lost at TY Point, 120 redundancies at Solid Energy, Huntley East Mine, and up to 100 job losses at the Kowara Mill. Not to mention the 400 jobs on the line at Spring Creek. All the many other foreclosures and redundancies that go unreported in the news media. It's great to see someone has turned up at last to hear an economic lesson he should have learned a long time ago, when he used to say that he represented provincial New Zealand. Some of us remember the facts, some do not, of course. Meanwhile, the latest stats, New Zealand data, confirms that the real economy is still not recovering from the economic downturn of 2007. There they were boasting just a month ago, and out come the latest figures, and that was a blip, and we're back going down again. The NZ Manufacturers and Exporters Association estimates that the overvalued dollar has cost the sector up to $10 billion over the past 3.5 years. $10 billion. $10 billion, 40,000 jobs. Again, for the horticulturalist, $10 billion, 40,000 jobs. And I tell you, if you're in the kiwifruit industry and in horticulture or in the flower industry, all this is crippling and damaging. We can no longer continue to ignore the cost. It's enormous. The context is the global financial crisis has had a profound effect. The recession has triggered with the collapse of US financiers and bankers, Lehman Brothers and Merrill Lynch and others, is still with us, and the consequences of the financial and economic crisis are still being felt. You know, I wouldn't laugh when the fact is that very soon those members are going to be gone. I wouldn't giggle about that, because I know what the polls are saying, and it's good night nurse for you. The global economic crisis is not over, and indeed the end is not yet. Well, they won't be giggling when they get into their private moments. I didn't talk about printing money at all. I haven't said that. It's not in the speech either. And indeed, the end is not yet in sight. China's prodigious growth is slowing. Europe's in the grip of crisis. The US, the recovery is faltering. Internationally, there is a pervasive air of uncertainty. Under these conditions, a persistently overvalued exchange rate is destructive. All around the world, central banks are actively intervening to trade against their own currencies. Governments from the UK to the US to Japan to Switzerland, Singapore, Taiwan, Malaysia, and all are using competitive devaluation as a tool of monetary policy. So why aren't we? Or is it that Mr. Carter and Mr. Banks are smarter than the Chinese and the Malaysians and the Singaporeans and the Taiwanese? Is they think they're smarter than these people because their economies are going that way and ours are going that way. The high dollar is crippling New Zealand's international competitiveness at a time when the competition is intensifying. We have entered a new economic era. The belief that central banks should only focus on one goal is pure, outdated ideology. Our exporters do not live in the world of economic theory. They are in the world of harsh economic reality. And one day soon they'll wake up around this country to just who it is that is their financial oppressor. Inflation is important, but it's not everything, particularly at a time when inflationary pressures are historically low. Mind you, not as low as when I was the Treasurer, where they were the lowest since 1975. That's our record. What's theirs? Since 1975, the lowest in those 3 years. Our priority must be the productive economy, exports, economic growth, employment and jobs. After all, the tradable sectors where real wealth and jobs are created. This has to be the focus of monetary policy in 2012, so why is it not? Now, just to be about everyone from the IMF to the Governor of the Reserve Bank acknowledges the problem and concedes we have a seriously overvalued dollar. Oh, yes, he did. You see, that's Nick Smith. So blind is he to his ideology, his ears aren't even open. Yes, the IMF governor did say that. All manner of people, Blanchard, Stiglitz, all saying it. Lee Kuan Yew says it. No, Nick Smith from the Badlands of the top of the South Island knows better. How arrogant can you get? Back in March, the Reserve Bank warned the dollar was too high. They said this was preventing the rebalancing of the economic growth of this country. 6 months ago, now it's soaring past 80%, 80 cents, 83, no signs of falling. It's reached the point where many financial analysts say it is no longer a question of if, but when New Zealand reaches dollar for dollar parity with the US. Oh, that'll give them a jolt. And they'll still come out with their measly excuses that we can't do anything. That would be disastrous. So why aren't they taking action? When the dollar was at 76 cents in 2007, the bank took action, not only resulting in a lower dollar, but a $411 million profit. That's a fact. This demonstrated back then that the Reserve Bank does have the ability to act when the dollar is overvalued. Now, they've had a foreign exchange intervention policy since 2004. Section 16 of the Act provides for the bank to do and deal in that fashion. Section 17 provides for the authority of the Minister of Finance to direct the Reserve Bank Governor, like the same Treasurer or the Chancellor of the Exchequer directs the English Federal or the English equivalent bank. They do it, but no. Mr. Carter and Mr. Smith are smarter. Thus, the legal framework for intervention order exists in the Principal Act. What's holding them back? Well, Mr. English could do something tomorrow if he would, but he won't unless this bill gets through. Mr. Speaker, it'll be a fact one day. Maybe not today, because of the narrow, blind ideology of people like Mr. Banks, whose political career is so successful that his party's going to oblivion and can hold any caucus in a telephone booth. Round about then, I think my policy's a bit out of date, wouldn't you? I would think that my policy is a bit of a problem. I can't fill a telephone booth. Oh, no, New Zealand first. New Zealand first packs halls all around this country. That's a sign of consumer demand. That's a sign of market share. It's a sign that our policies on monetary policy are relevant and people are wanting them. And I might say, as the Bible says, the numbers are growing and they're becoming legion. And one day they'll be gone. The time for dithering, delay and indecision over the exchange rate has to end now. It could pass tonight. It could become a fact very, very shortly. But all we're asking for is all sides of the House to give it a select committee hearing. Let all New Zealanders have their say, those for and against. It's called democracy. And why would the government be against that unless they're too scared to have their shibboleths exposed to the light of day?
The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to oppose the bill. Mr. Speaker, I would